So some of you might know that I spent a few months living in China, in which I was basically my whole life was essentially practicing martial arts and just kind of like living in the mountains in some outskirts in the Chinese mainland. And during my time there was a form of punishment called staffing that I continued to hear about, but I never really experienced. So um, there would be times where, for example, there was one time where I moved the furniture in my room into something that it just felt better. So I moved it around, and so when the masters found out, they would do room inspections every week, and when they saw it, they didn't like it, and apparently I needed to ask permission and all that to move it, and so they asked me to move it back. And when they saw that I didn't, they threatened that they would staff me. And so I didn't really understand still what staffing was because I had not seen it. But eventually I kind of gave up and I just switched my room. And I also got um, a bunch of friends from there that helped me out to set it back. And I think sort of like the friendly backup was really powerful to actually kind of convince me to turn things around. But anyway, right before I left, basically, there was suddenly an influx in staffing. So the first one was there was a Friday in which um, one when curfew hit, there was a time at the school that would change throughout the year, but at a certain time during the night, it was lights out. So everyone needed to have their lights turned off and pretty much be quiet. You could sort of like stay awake, but you couldn't be obvious about it, I guess. So curfew hit, and one of the lights on one of the guys' room stayed on, and so the master doing the inspection that night eventually like walked into the room and realized that none of the guys were there. Where one of them was out sort of like in vacation, but the other guy was at the school, and it turned out that he was in one of the girls' rooms. Um, and so that was one thing that happened that day. And then the other thing that happened was that two guys got pretty drunk, and one of them didn't make it to school in time for curfew, which meant that the school closed its gates and the person got left outside in the middle of winter. So the cops were the ones that found the guy outside of the gates, and they were the ones that had to like kind of like get him into the school. And so the school probably got flagged or something, because it's also China, so you don't really like, I feel like the relationship with the government and the officials is really different. Um, and so that all happened on a Friday, and so Monday, on the before classes, um, they basically lined up everyone at the training area, and they explained everything that happened so that everyone was aware of what I essentially just explained to you guys with a bit more details. And then they got all four of these people involved to go into a plank position on the floor, and then they staffed them, which basically means that one of the masters would grab a broomstick or some sort of stick and hit him right under the butt cheeks. And I think the guy that got the most staffing got 5 or something like that. And so that was like a pretty like emotional thing for a lot of the people at the school to witness, because we were all kind of like standing there, and in a sense we couldn't go anywhere. I guess you can always go somewhere, or you can always like close your eyes or whatever, but we were watching these people who were our friends or who were people that we were really connecting with be punished in front of everyone. And in many ways, it's a pretty tough physical punishment. And soon after, there was an issue, and I guess we didn't really understand ever like what actually happened, but the consensus seemed to be that so we not only were there international students, but there were also Chinese students at the school, and the school was way more tough on the Chinese students. And so apparently one of the days, the students on one of the classes weren't yelling loud enough, and the point of yelling is, for in this particular scenario, is that it helps you use power. It helps you put in more power into whatever it is that you're doing, if you're like punching or kicking or all these kind of things. And apparently they weren't yelling loud enough or putting enough effort in it, and so, or some of them weren't, and so they lined all those kids up and they staffed all of them. And it really put the idea of punishment into perspective for me, because it made me realize something that I've been sort of suspecting for a long time. And it is that I've always felt like there's something really, really goofy about punishment, in the sense that I don't know who punishment is for. Particularly for me, I remember when I was growing up, I was just in like elementary school or middle school, I'd get grounded very often, and a lot of those times it would be for shit I didn't even do. When I was growing up, it was just me and my mom at home, and sometimes my mom would do something and she would forget that she was the one that did it, and then the blame would fall on me, or like all sorts of things would happen, and then I'd get blamed for it, and then I'd get grounded, or things would blow out of proportion, and then I'd get grounded. And not to say that that was always the case, because I was a little bit of trouble. But still, like very early on, I was like, man, there's something really goofy about this, and I don't feel like I'm actually learning a lesson, you know. And so when I went through all of this in China and I saw all these things happening, it made me realize that maybe the recent punishment is really not getting us anywhere. Is that it doesn't really fix the problem, and it doesn't really teach anyone a lesson. What it does is that it gives satisfaction to the people dealing the judgment. So to say that the people, if someone was to get beaten up in the street or something, or maybe like someone goes and catcalls someone's girlfriend, and then the boyfriend goes and beats up the person who catcalled the girlfriend. The boyfriend might feel some satisfaction because he thinks he's doing the right thing. You know, he thinks he's dealing out justice. He thinks he is doing right by his girlfriend. But does that really teach the person who catcalled the girlfriend anything? Because you know, an example that I often think about is when people say, oh, you know, that person beat someone else up, you gotta beat that person up to teach him a lesson. You know, if I go and I say that, if I get beaten up and then I go and I say, oh, you know, I gotta go and I gotta teach that person a lesson by beating them up, that seems like a really goofy idea, in the sense that I obviously didn't learn a lesson from getting beaten up, but I expect somehow that lesson would be that the other person will learn the lesson through the same method by which I didn't learn the lesson. And so anyway, you know, I feel like this is an idea that I'm going to continue to explore, because I don't know what the answer is. But I definitely feel like the methods by which we are looking at punishment right now, I don't think they're really working long term. And more importantly, I don't think they're getting us to where I think it is that we want to be. That by um, causing people ill or by putting people through harm. We're expecting people to be better, but I don't think we are getting better through those methods. And I don't think we know what better actually means. So it also feels like we're shooting in the dark, and we have convinced ourselves that we are actually hitting our mark, but we don't even know if the gun is firing. We're really in a position of utmost confusion. And so in part I'm kind of sharing this because I'd like to hear maybe like some people's perspectives on it, because I do feel, like there is something almost like intrinsic of I guess I don't really feel it as much anymore, but I remember, growing up feeling that whenever I would see almost like the universe evening things up when someone did something, there'd be some there'd be a little bit of pride. It'd be like, yeah, there's some the universe did justice. But now I see it and I don't make that connection. I can't make that distinction. I just feel like the universe is just sort of doing its thing. I'm not connecting it to. I'm not looking at it from like sort of like the perspective of karma, that a lot of people think of karma as sort of like some universal justice system. That I just feel like I don't know. I don't know. I think this is gonna be a pretty interesting topic of just seeing how it evolves and seeing how it evolves in my perspective, and of course I'd love to hear how you guys feel about it again. But yeah, it just doesn't feel like it's taking us where we want to be. And I wonder if we might accidentally be pushing ourselves in the opposite direction, sort of where it is that we want to be or that we should be.